Diallo, Sekou. I'm the president of the Black Commission, along with one of our members, Alicia, Fason, of the Black Commission. Our main thing is we have 4 things that we deal with. We write bills or policies specifically for Black people or the Black community, especially here in Jacksonville, Florida. Those four main things is education, economics, politics, and health, of course, including mental health. And then if we had to add a 5th one, it'd be environmental issues also, because we did write something for a couple of issues that was here in Jacksonville. Now, getting them passed is something else. Right. Even though when we've taken it to the office, they wind up being, we hear about them a couple of years later, but they didn't come from us though. We just hear that it winds up happening. So a little bit about our guest tonight, this evening, is Octavius Holiday, the Assistant State Attorney, also Deputy Director of the Human Rights Division and the Community Crime Strategies Unit. Mr. Holiday is a graduate of Duke University and also UF Law.
All right.
Yes, sir.
He's gonna be one of our judges one day, right?
That's it. We have to take that off air. We'll see. We'll see. I did have ambitions at one point, but that's not where I am right now. So we'll see.
Okay. So can you give us just a little brief about your tenure in the state attorney's office?
Sure. Well, I started back in 2003. Where everyone starts in county court doing misdemeanors and work my way through the system, the felony court. We used to have a division back then called repeat offender court. So I got to that point. And then ultimately did juvenile. I finished up my tenure at the state attorney's office in 2012. And then while Melissa Nelson was running for office against the previous state attorney, Angela Corey, Melissa, by the way, was my division chief back in like 2005, 2006, something like that. And we just kept bumping into each other. She was out trying to get the vote. We ended up in the same spaces and reconnected. And she had a certain idea in terms of her ideas, in terms of transparency in the office. It's been historically, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone here, but it's been historically maybe a disconnect between the state attorney's office and JSO and the people of color, Black folks in particular. So she felt like there was a division that can be created to address some of those issues. So she, not just Melissa, but it was also Mac Hevener. He's not here any longer. He's a federal prosecutor in North Carolina now. But at the time, they felt like a division was needed to address police officer violence when the officer is on duty and gets a little handsy or batters a civilian. They needed someone to look at those matters. They wanted to diversify one particular decision-making process, which is death penalty review, where it used to be more unilateral, just the prosecutor herself would make that decision in terms of whether to seek death or not. But this time, under Ms. Nelson, she would want to have a diverse committee to review everything to make sure that obviously race isn't the deciding factor in a death penalty decision. So we did that, and then we also have officer-involved shootings, which I know, Diallo, you know a lot about, where we felt maybe the voices of the community weren't heard enough, and we wanted to diversify that committee. So that ended up being 23 individuals on the committee that have various experiences in homicides and shootings, and coming to a decision in terms of whether to prosecute a law enforcement officer or not, and also submit reports to the community. So it was all about transparency. And then ultimately, as the position grew, I became sort of a liaison to the Black community in a lot of different ways. But then we had some input from some other agencies around the country, and they have these community crime strategies units. They have these units where they go in the community, and we're not just prosecuting, but we're trying to engage the community as much as possible. So if anything, I'm here with that hat on, that this is your community agency, and we don't turn our backs on any agencies. We'll talk to everyone, try to be as transparent and candid as possible. but we're trying to move the needle mostly on violent crime, but definitely on transparency to the community. So hopefully that builds, you got to start somewhere, honestly. But there's a lot of work to be done, but ultimately I think it's a big step. So
talk to me about your strategies for the community engagement aspect, and have you seen any or been a part of any like direct impact with the engagement on the community crime strategy unit?
We hesitate to say partner because that's not what a state agency really can do. But in terms of being engaged and connected to Newtown Success Zone and also NAACP, also Urban League, but also some various groups around the community. So what the idea is, we have a unit inside of our office called the Targeted Crime Unit, Targeted Prosecution. And part of that is working into two parts. One is reactive, and the other one is proactive. So on the proactive side, we are trying to have prosecutors engage more with the community, and we do a lot of sheriff watch meetings. All we're doing is we're trying to touch hands everywhere. So at least our names get out there. So when people have issues, they reach out to us. A lot of times it's not an issue that the state attorney's office can address necessarily directly, but we can put them in. I think it's a powerful tool. If someone has the telephone number of a prosecutor or someone in our office, we can make phone calls they may not be able to make, whether it's city council, whether it's the zone commanders and JSO, et cetera. And in the criminal justice system, sometimes it's just a lot of questions. We get a lot of questions just about the system. They think the children are maybe being railroaded, not being treated fairly, and we have to address a lot of those concerns. So again, the bottom line is to create transparency, but it's really just letting the community know that we're accessible. Why do
you think? I actually want to get back a little bit more into the details. So when you say with your partners, with Newtown, Urban League,
I'm saying we can't. We can't use the term partnership. We cannot use the term partnership because
it's a matter of accessibility via those other organizations. Is that a good way to put it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So why do you think there's such a dark shadow over this particular office? And I only can speak about it in Jacksonville.
Okay.
Outside of the adjudication and Angela Corey, why do you think it's such a negative connotation when you talk about prosecution in the state attorney's office?
I think, just in terms historically, you're looking, and I'm not talking about Angela Corey necessarily, I'm talking about just the relationship between the Black community and police officers and law enforcement. Then, and we've done studies. We've had I think it's the DuPont study come in and look at our numbers and see if we have any glaring racial disparities, that kind of thing. But no matter what the numbers say, so we put those reports out. We had a press conference, put those numbers out, and they're not glaring. They're not jumping off the page like, oh, you know what, this defendant is treated much differently because they're African American versus this one. But it's ingrained. This is not. I didn't go to school for this. This is just what I feel as a Black man in this country.
Right.
We have, as a people, suffered trauma for so long, and it's been passed along from our grandparents and great grandparents to us now. Yeah. It is hard, and I'm not gonna say impossible because we're trying to create trust, but it is hard to trust law enforcement. We've been mistreated for so long in so many areas, and even now, just anecdotally, you'd look at how someone might be treated on Moncrief or Gold Fair versus someone's treated in Queens Harbor, and if you just ask that question like that, are they treated the same? And a lot of people would say, no, I don't think so. And why is that? Right. So it's not just race necessarily, but it could be class, it could be age. But regardless, we want our people to be treated the same wherever we are. Right. So there's a long history of trauma. And I think when events happen, a shooting happens, for our people, it's easy to say, or it's quickly to say, you know what, law enforcement didn't do what they're supposed to do, or to correct way. We're very critical because just there's a historical backdrop to that. So that's what we're trying to combat. And that's why I began when I first started just saying it's an uphill battle. It's a long way to go, but you have to start somewhere. So that's what we are.
Alicia, you had a question?
I like what we just talked about because I think maybe it's an issue as far as, I mean, we have that stigma that we pretty much were ingrained in us, what we grew up with. So I guess how do we switch people to having people in our community into having like a more proactive mindset instead of reactive? I think that's the hardest thing. I guess, do you have, it's an uphill battle, but do you have any more input on that? Like how can we switch from being more proactive and engaging with law enforcement instead of just shunning it? I don't know.
Well, this is pre-COVID, but I think it was going pretty well. The FBI led an effort. What's my man's name? Carlton Peoples. He's not here anymore, but he used to be over the FBI outreach. And the FBI, along with JSO, State Attorney's Office, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, used to do a thing called United. Every other month, we would do a program called United. And we targeted maybe about 100 different leaders in the community. There's some criticism.
I never got that call, but go
There's
ahead.
some criticism to that now.
I'm not a leader, obviously.
I'm just saying there's some criticism because I'll just put it this way. I think if you're really trying to reach the masses, you can't always go to the pastor of the biggest church and the head of NAACP and the head of whatever. And I'm not putting Isaiah Rowland or anyone down for that. You know, I'm just saying that there has to be more grassroots folks involved as well, right? So, but regardless of that, you still had the who's who in Jacksonville, if you will, coming out. And then the idea was when the issue happens, information, well, we're teaching those leaders, one, to not be quickly to respond, to wait for information to come out, because investigations take a little bit, they take a little while. But ultimately, we felt like we were getting some progress in having the community not be quick to judge and just wait for the information to come out. And I know we're as a community, we're anxious for information. And I will say that as a result of some of the protests in Jacksonville, that body cam footages are released much sooner now. You know, it used to be we wait till the complete investigation was over with, and that's actually the more prudent approach. But I remember yelling in one of the meetings, it's prudent, but it doesn't solve any transparency issues in our community. We want it, and I'm not saying website in the community wants it in a day, 2 days. And we have to figure out ways for that release not to harm the investigation. But if the people demand it, then we need to put it out there. So all that to say, there's no quick fix and no easy answer, but we did do United. We're going to try to kick that back up in maybe the new year. And we're just trying to see as many people as we can. We go to schools, try to touch young people where they are, so they're not looking at the state attorney's office as the big bad wolf, or even officers as the enemy. So, but again, it's a lot of history to overcome.
Yeah.
Why do you think? Well, I do know why certain offices always go to the same people, because it's.
What do you mean? I'm not sure. What do you mean? Certain offices? Yeah,
certain offices, certain state attorney's office, sheriff office, any other big office in the city of Jacksonville, they will always call on the same people, and those same people haven't had a direct impact on this community in over 20 years. And I moved back in 2001.
Okay.
And I haven't seen an impact based on those things, those people that they keep calling upon, other than just figureheads, and the same figureheads to cool the masses down. To me, it's almost the same blueprint as when Africans was enslaved. They would utilize an enslaved African. He would mimic the preacher. Then he would only say what the preacher tells him to teach, and then they would use that enslaved preacher to go to the other enslaved Africans. Don't revolt, calm down, wait a minute, pray on it, that type of thing. And then here in Jacksonville, Florida, it's almost 156 years. Nothing has really changed. It's almost the same MO. But anyway.
Yeah, I will add a retort to that, because I can't co-sign that completely. I mean, it might be some of that, I don't know, right? But a big effort with the program United was education. And so we took some of those leaders and we went to the FBI simulation shootings and to JSO simulating shootings. To the untrained person, a shooting might even look unlawful if you're not trained in what the law is and obviously how to see those videos. So I felt like it was more educational than getting people. So there might be some of what you're talking about. I don't know about that. I'll look at it in terms of, I know so many times when a case happens, there's misinterpretation of the law, there's misinterpretation of the facts, and when it gets muddy, and then there's no trust there at that point. So I'll leave it at that and say that a lot of what we intended to do is to educate the public on how these investigations happen and how we get to the results we get to. But go ahead.
I went through that simulation with my father and a brother of mine, and you know, it is that quick. You gotta be quick on your feet, and you know, it's always judgment calls. But in that same instance, we have to look at the mentality of the people that the JSO are hiring, ex-military, those who may not. I mean, if we don't ever really deal with the psychological aspect of people that's supposed to be policing in our particular community, then we're going to always have the same issues, right?
Yeah,
like
I agree.
even yeah, right. Okay, so I've had the conversations privately about understanding. I had to understand exactly how the law is going to work when the thing happens, and that allowed me and my organization to be able to move forward with dealing with families or whoever was dealing with, you had to have patience. And unfortunately, it's just like it doesn't happen. People at this time, 2021, people want instant gratification. And then when you talk about somebody's family member who's been murdered, it's just like high anxiety until they can hear something from someone in authority that can help them out.
And that came up in, these meetings aren't to the public. I'm just sharing with you my experiences in some of these meetings with leadership. Mm-hmm. That comes up, not only the community demanding answers quickly, but the families deserve it, right? So I can't imagine losing a loved one and having to wait 6 months to hear anything from the state attorney's office. So those concerns were addressed, and I can get into reasons why they was happening the way it was before, but ultimately they've been addressed. So if we can release the videos quick when we do, and body cam footage, it was a lot of pushback before they came out. And I don't know any officers.
About the body cams, do you think body cameras doing any good?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it was a two-way street now, to be frank about it, because you have some citizens who are falsely accusing officers of doing this, that, and the other. Right. That drops right off. I mean, we have video of people making accusations right there in front of the body cam, and the officer said, well, you're on video. And they're like, oh, well, they switched that whole story. And also it makes officers more alert in how they treat the public. And we have behavior. Right. Behavior that should have been there already, but anyway. Body cam footage, we screen a lot of those where they come through, and it's not an offense. They didn't commit a crime. The officer didn't commit a crime. But we felt like they were being discourteous to the public, and we're going to let the sergeants know about that. So there's extra training in that and just how to engage the public. So no, and then as far as evidence, some things are crystal, when you have it on video. Some things are, you have angles and things like that, but a lot of times it's really a really great tool as far as evidence, witness statements, injuries to witnesses. So no, I love it. And I don't think same officers who gave a lot of pushback originally, I don't think they give a lot of pushback now. It protects them when they're on the street. So
I remember the pushback. You remember the pushback?
Yeah. All over the country, it was pushback. And all over the country, if you survey those officers now, they all say, I'm not even going on the street without my body cam on. It's my protection as well, versus any kind of accusations and whatnot. But I think the behavior has improved, hasn't gotten perfect, but I still think, and this is just my personal opinion, there are some units that don't use body camera. They're just starting to use it, and I've always felt they should have had it from the beginning. So, but the JSO, that's a JSO question, and they're addressing that going forward.
I'll address with the sheriff also about dash cams, especially on some of those so-called drug units, where we have there's one particular cop that's killed a few people and he's still on the streets. And obviously, I guess there's nothing wrong with that based on what the so-called area that he's in. But all the shootings were questionable, but all of them came across as justified. And this is an issue I personally have with not just JSO or any state attorney's office. It's just that it seems like every shooting, and it has to be an immaculate order, that every shooting or every killing of JSO has been justified since they've been created. What are the odds of that?
I couldn't tell you that. All I can know about is the meetings and the reviews I've been a part of since 2017, coming back to the office. So if there's a shooting that is unjustified, we're obligated to prosecute it. But we're also obligated to follow the law. And as it stands, a lot of times the confusion happens when there is, I think the flee and felon rule, that actually comes up a lot because I think people don't really understand that particular tenet of law. And then also in terms of how quickly an officer has to respond, the potential threat is an issue as well. So I will add this is kind of me and my soapbox. Obviously, there's a lot of tension in the community when it comes to when an African-American is killed or shot, not even just killed, shot. There are a lot of shootings that happen to non-African-Americans. Right. But our media, and I'll throw this out at them, our media likes to play up different scenarios, and they like to press that narrative and stoke the flames of whatever dissension there is. But we review every single shooting where the fire officer fired and it hit someone. They fired a gun or fired a firearm and it didn't hit anyone, we don't review that. But if they fired the firearm and it hit someone, whether they killed them or not, that's going to be reviewed by our office. And that spans the spectrum of different ages and colors and whatnot. But the ones that are most, because historically we have that trauma, I frankly got to say that the community is more concerned about officer on Black person.
Right. And see, but that goes back to, not to go tit for tat, but when we talk about the historical or systemic relationship between so-called Black community and officers, this is why you're going to have that played out versus a white officer shooting a white officer. And you know what's also odd is the number of Black officers shooting unarmed white kids or white people. That number is also lopsided versus in the other direction, which I've had conversations with friends of mine on the force, and it's just like, hey, in their mindset, the kids are doing, the Black kids are doing it. These white kids are not doing it on a level in which they're being shot at or shot. But here, I have a question.
Right.
Will people be able to bring the complaints directly to your office?
Complaints of what?
Anything.
A complaint against an officer?
What is there a complaint that they can bring to your office?
Got to go through JSO first. So if you have a complaint where the officer might have committed a crime, then that's going to go through integrity at JSO. They're going to investigate that fully, and then they're going to bring it to us in the form of an arrest warrant request and a recommendation. But you also have internal affairs where you can make a complaint. You can walk into any substation and make a complaint against any officer on whatever situation. Now, why that's important, I said this to the community on several occasions. Say you have an officer, Officer Smith, and he has some issue that came up. He battered someone. The first thing I'm going to do is pull his personnel file and see how many complaints he's had in the community, things that didn't rise to the level of crime. And we have people that just have something happen to them with JSO or whoever, whatever law enforcement agency it is, and they go to Facebook or social media with their complaint and not actually file a report with the department. I don't have that. I don't have access to that. I can't lean into that officer as much as I would want to if that officer is in fact a problem person. We don't know that. So I think making reports when somebody has offended you or you felt like violated your rights is vital, but we got to have that paper trail along those same lines. So, but in the same sense, if there is no complaints against that officer, we got to treat it just like that. There's no complaints against the officer. So,
so I was going through the website, and I was looking at the charts, and I was a little thrown off. I don't know if the community knows that that your office, I mean, along with the office in total, has a huge amount of resources in a sense. But I was looking at the complaints on the human trafficking. It was just like one for 2001. I'm like, but I don't know. People shouldn't necessarily do what they call the state attorney's office for human trafficking when, Florida's like top in the country.
Well, there's been
I only saw like one complaint on the website.
There has been some changeover in terms of leadership at the sheriff's office in terms of who handles those kind of cases. But in addition to that, no, the complaints typically don't come off the street like that. We normally have a prostitution arrest, and we'll interview that person, and then that's how we typically uncover a string of human trafficking situations. And then so that's how it normally is. It comes through an arrest of usually a lady, doesn't have to be, but usually a young lady. And once that prostitution arrest comes through, we have them interviewed, and if it leads to the same names being called as being their so-called pimps or whatever, then we know we have a problem. And then we'll do a bite sting on that person and try to get that person arrested. So it typically doesn't come in like that. Most criminal cases aren't initiated by the public, to be honest. There's a few that has more traction, but normally it doesn't happen that way.
But okay, so they need to, with that instance, they need to stick with JSO on reporting that, right?
Yes, sir. Because they're going to be our office is only so big in terms of doing all the investigations. Like I do a lot of elder abuse, and even though someone can contact my office and say, "Hey, I got a suspicion of this elderly person or this age adult being victimized," the better route would be to contact DCF. DCF has two different avenues. They have child abuse and they have elder abuse. So you want to make a DCF complaint. That DCF, when they do that investigation right away, by the way, they're obligated to notify the sheriff's office and the state attorney's office. Sheriff's office is going to be the investigation arm. We're just going to be getting knowledge of it. Sheriff's office is going to be on the investigation arm. When they get up enough evidence, they'll bring the warrant to my attention. I issue the warrant. But just making a complaint to me, all I'm going to do is kick it over to DCF or kick it over to, you're wasting time, honestly. Even though I have responded directly to some complaints, that's a rare circumstance. We don't have that kind of time and manpower.
Okay.
But the hotline is a resource. It's a resource, So yes, ma'am.
I had a question going back to the community crime strategies unit.
Yes, ma'am.
So is that you guys are accessible via other organizations? Like how could somebody from the community that wants to be involved touch base with you guys? Is there like a public meetup, or how can they get access to y'all?
When you say access, you're saying have a meeting with me or have a meeting with
maybe a meeting, or is there like a public community like group that is like, how do we know when you guys meet up and how can the public meet with you? And
we meet privately, we meet in our office, but in terms of getting in touch with us, then Kiara Nixon is our liaison.
Got it. Okay.
And I wish I had her office number off the top of my head. Let me email her real quick.
While you're doing that, there's something I printed off from the website that I wanted to mention a few things. That's some of you guys' programs and initiative that the public may or may not know about.
Sure, right.
And then you could just touch on them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the whole list, that starts with juvenile justice and ends with the 7 habits of successful families.
Now I don't have the website memorized now, but I'm familiar with most of our programs. I'll say that. Okay, so if I know about it, I'll talk about it. If I don't, I got a punt. Send you over to some other person who has more expertise on it.
All right, that's cool. So we talked about that office has a history with a huge amount of adjudication of young Black males from Jacksonville.
Sure.
Have you seen, or do you think the numbers have changed any since Melissa's taken?
I think so. Yes, sir. I think so. Let's just go through a kind of a 15-year history. And I was just talking about this yesterday. I was at a friend's house, one of my 100 Black Men brothers, and he had a friend of his over. And this person, I'm not gonna call names out, but this person actually was over the house that housed some of the young men when they got out of jail. And I'll tell you what the program was years ago, real briefly, and then how that was dismantled.
Okay.
Quickly. It was, say you have a 15-year-old commit armed robbery, right? Mm-hmm. Had a firearm, working firearm, robbed a grocery store, a convenience store. Okay, fine. You have a life felony right there. He's got a gun in his hand. That's a 10-year minimum mandatory. Can get up to life in prison. Can't get life as a juvenile, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Serious time. Well, there was a program on the J. Plunkett and Harris Shorts team where we would actually direct file the child to adult court with the intent of pleading him to a lesser charge, an unarmed robbery charge, not making him a felon, right? Giving him a year in jail so he can get his GED, get work training, whatever he needs to do. And then he's on probation for 2 years to show that he's learned what he needs to learn and get reacclimated to society. And while in those 2 years, if he doesn't have a solid, stable place to live, we had a community house available for that young man to go to and get more mentoring and training. And that success had national acclaim. Okay.
What happened to him?
Well, get into that. That's one way of doing it, right?
Okay.
And when Ms. Corey came in 2009, in January 2009, she immediately dismantled that. No, we're not doing that. And the instructions to the office were, we're not going to have that program. We're going to direct file these kids. The same thing we did before, direct file, but not give them that withhold, not give them that program at the jail, not give them that house. Basically cut the funding for that house off because we weren't sending kids there, and they wanted to get double digits in prison. And I had that as a defense attorney. I was a defense attorney at the time, and I remember so vividly, and it's emotional still, where I had a 14-year-old out east who had committed a robbery, and the prosecutor wanted to give him, I think it was 14 years in prison. Give a 14-year-old 14 years in prison. Didn't shoot the gun. Not to say it's not violent, but it was ridiculous. And ultimately, the child didn't get that, but just the audacity to say, I want 14 years on a child with no record, right? That's the mentality that the office had at the time. So where are we now? You still have to treat serious crimes seriously, but we're not trying to scar someone's record forever. We're not trying to throw them away. I think the U.S. Supreme Court has come up with, I don't think I know, come up with some parameters. You can't give a juvenile life in prison, even on even on a death case, you can't give them life in prison.
Right.
So you have to give them some means of rehabilitating and getting out. And that just goes with common sense. But that's not being soft on crime, as some people like to say. That's being rational. That a child at 14 is not going to know everything you need to know in life in terms of, how to react to this stimulus or that stimulus or whatever. So it is better right now. I can't tell you what the up-to-date minutes are on the number of cases we direct filed. I know they're less than what Ms. Corey was doing. But ultimately, I think our willingness as an office to lean toward rehabilitation is a lot stronger than under the previous administration.
Would you say, do you guys take into account anything about the mentality, psychology, immatureness, undeveloped brains of a 14-year-old when prosecuting?
Yeah, sure. Now, granted, that's the defense attorney's job to present that to us now. Okay. But ultimately, you have to be knowledgeable that is definitely a childhood trauma, right? What a child's going through. Take it into account. At some level, I gotta be blunt with you, at some level, you do a bad enough thing, that's gonna go out the window because we're gonna say, you know what, the safety of the public is gonna outweigh that. But for the most part, yeah, you wanna make sure you're not throwing away young people who can be rehabilitated. So I think that's the attitude we have. I don't know the ins and outs of what happened with the juvenile committee and how Children's Hope Alliance ended up with all the diversion. I don't know how that went. I got my things I'm doing, and I wasn't able to be engaged fully with the juvenile programs like I had been before.
Yeah, so it is a very, very serious issue to me in Jacksonville, man. Every day, I swear to God, man. I mean, now we are talking about 13 and 14-year-old kids, high speed chases, driving, the girl driving.
Yeah.
They just found 2 other people from some other murder. And to me, of course, it's beyond embarrassment. It hurts because these are children. Right. And the question is like, where the hell the parents at? And this is why we create these organizations to kind of be an extension or try to, fishnet some things where we can. But man, what would you think or your opinion on, and I know it could be a very long answer, on cutting down some of these violent crimes within these children that's like 25 and under?
That's the big ask, right? Who
Right.
knows the answer to that, right? But I think we have a lot of parties concerned. Where I am right now is, and we've had enough studies done. I don't know if we need more studies, but I go back to the point, and I'm not bashing people who have become successful and they're the head of this agency or that agency. I'm not, but you got to have more people on the ground though, and you got to have more men on the ground, honestly. So I just saw that story in I think it was Louisiana, where there was certain fights, a certain number of fights in a week at a school, and the fathers in that community went and basically took over the school. And it's something that affect that level that's needed. And a lot of times in Jacksonville, you get one group, and again, I don't want to pick on Urban League or NAACP or whatever, but you get one group and they're doing their thing, and this other group is doing their thing, and it's all hands on deck kind of thing, right? And you combine that, I guess I'm throwing enough stones around. You combine that with people who have gotten their education and gotten their money and all of that, and raise their children. They don't feel the need to come back and help in any way, any mentorship or giving their time. So that really irks me, and I really don't like associating with people like that. But I think there's a lot of resources being untapped in our community. But the bottom line is, how are you going to get a young kid, 13, 14 years old? Their mom is single. He has multiple siblings. It's a male, right? He's already failed 2 grades, right? And no encouragement, no guidance from anywhere, right? No father figure, right? And he wants what everybody wants, the luxuries of life, right? Nice things. And there's no legal avenue to get to it, honestly. And then you say, well, go work at McDonald's. Okay, but I can do this. I can pick up this part, put this stick, put this whatever, and get this money this way. Right. So how do we get inside those young kids' minds and say that's just going to lead to death and destruction, and you're going to end up in prison or dead? We've been saying that for 40 years, right? But ultimately, I don't know even though it gets discouraging, frankly, it gets discouraging, but there's work to be done. So Grassroots is where it's at. So Community Crime Strategies Unit, as opposed to the way United did it, even though we touch base with a lot of people who are in positions, we want the grassroots people, right? We have a community mapping strategy right now where Melissa wants us not just to say, oh, this is where NAACP has their meetings, or this is where Bethel Baptist is, but to say this is where Miss Ann is on the corner of this street and she knows everybody in the community. Let's get her information. What's her affiliations? What church she goes to? Is she in a sorority? Is she in this circle, this sewing circle, whatever, so that we can have access to people who are right down the ground and try. So we're really trying to be innovative as possible, but there are no answers. There's no answer so far, but I know inaction is not the answer. Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's many problems, and it's going to take many solutions. And it's ongoing, and it's almost, you have to overlay each issue, each solution. You can't just like shoot one and then wait later and then shoot. You got to shoot them all. You got to throw it all at the same time. To me personally,
yeah, it's going to take money too. We haven't talked about that, but to think that it's not going to take money, it's foolish. And I don't get into politics a whole lot, but I know that there's some people who believe in just holding back and we're not going to just throw money at the issue. Yeah, you got to throw money at the issue, right? Mm-hmm. Lack of money is what created the issue, right? So we can't hide from poverty, right? That creates the issue. We can't hide from money is going to be able to help solve the issue. So, but you got some people who are in office who don't see it that way, right? So start right there, get them to people to make commitments before they get in office, and then holding them to that commitment once they're in office, and they don't have to look like us, right? So
right, I agree.
Right.
So where did you discover your sense of justice?
Where did I discover my sense of justice? Well, I grew up in a Black neighborhood, so I knew how we were treated back then in Altamont, back in Orlando area. Had police draw a gun on me unnecessarily and unjustly. And so I've been through my own traumas and had, deaths in my neighborhood, friends killed. So you develop a sense of what you want to do in life. And I was blessed early with athleticism and some grades, and So I've always felt I was gonna go back to that same community and help, but then Jacksonville was pulling at me, honestly. So end up in Jacksonville. But that's where it starts at. I mean, you grow up in certain areas, you know what's right and wrong, right? We were getting it seems like a dream now. You look back on it, but they had the police officers, we used to call them the Duke boys. They got masks on, they come around in a rider truck, they jump up, we see a bunch of us on the side of the road, we just listen to Michael Jackson, man, just talking. And they jump out the back of the truck. One. They throwing everybody down. They punching us, beating us up, throwing us down. We just black kids. Like, I didn't know anything about the Fourth Amendment, none of that. Just knew that Duke boys coming, we gonna run. They think we criminals gonna be running, but we just like not trying to get beat up today.
Right.
But so your sense of justice, if you put it that broadly, is really a matter of just living long enough in the skin. So that's kind of where it comes from.
That's amazing, because your same story resonates throughout the country. Right. Whether, I'm from I'm from Alameda, Fairfax, and I spent the weekends and summers in Flag Street where my father was manager, right? Right. So those areas, even to this day, will still get a bad name when it's not the overall population, but a few people. Right. But if those few people looked like me, had wore their hair like me, and we grew up with them, they cool with us, but they were doing their own thing and we were doing this. Right. We all get drugged in that net.
Exactly right.
And this is why it's important about having a proper representation, like in your position, in every position, especially those who are doing the arresting. But we're not having that. It's a huge issue. I mean, we can get into the whole hiring of black men at JSO and all the whole thing, but I just think, I'm pretty sure you feel the same way I do about representation, to be able to alleviate those type of things from happening, those people who can understand the culture.
Right. And that's, all right, so I guess the catchword is diversity, right? So we want diversity on the bench, we want diversity in the state attorney's office, we want diversity on the sheriff's office. And that is not to say Black folks want easy passes or leniency. What we want is fairness, right? Be treated the same across the board. So I'm on the hiring committee here at the state attorney's office, and we're trying to get more people into this office that have a varied background to make sure justice is equally meted out across the board. That definitely includes more Black people, but I've been very blunt about this. Everybody who look like us ain't like us. And what I'm saying about that is that everyone who's Black doesn't have a relationship with the community or a will to have a relationship with the community. All I want is the will. Like, you don't have to come in and have it already built. I'm not expecting you to, have all the connections and whatnot already, but I want you to have a will for the community, a heart for the community, I call it. So when I'm interviewing people, I'm asking about that. I'm asking about your GPA and how talented you are in the courtroom, but I also want to know, what do you feel about mentorship and going into the community? Because that's what I want, right? I want somebody who's an asset and not just somebody who we check them off as a Black person, and that goes down our overall number, but they're not an asset. So I'm like, that's a loss. So, but I mean, you got to look at it. Look how long Rhonda took to get on. Judge Peoples Waters took to get on the bench. Different situations like that we're still struggling. But ultimately, I think there has been some progress, and I know that since Melissa took over, we bring in 4 or 5 African American attorneys a year, and we go all over to find them. We go all over to find them. The National Prosecutors Association has have people applying through them, and we do those interviews. There's a Southeast Minority Job Fair in Atlanta every year. We do those. Go down to FAMU.
Okay.
So we're gonna do what we got to do.
HBCUs.
Absolutely. My daughter's at FAMU right now. Now I look back and I mean, that's a topic for a different subject. But I went to Duke. They recruited me, and I got my beef with why I didn't HBCU. If I was going to play D1, I could have played at FAMU. I could have played at Howard, but they didn't come. So
what position?
Dang, man, that's embarrassing right there. Now you see all this wealth on me, all this girth, but I played flanker. I was an H-back back in the day. So
what?
I felt like, yeah.
We got footage?
Huh?
Do we have footage?
Yeah, you might have it. If you look, you might. Now I'm telling you, I used to love hurting people, but I play defensive. I play safety as well. But regardless, that's another issue again, but I felt like, I'll just say quickly, I think Deion Sanders is doing yeoman's work of bringing light to it.
Yes.
He came out the same era I did back in the 80s, and he said the same thing recently, that HBCUs didn't even attempt to recruit him. You didn't have to recruit me. You just had to give me a letter saying I can go there for free, and immediately you're in the mix. But for me, it came down to Annapolis and Duke. I thought Howard was where I wanted to go, but I'm not trying to pay. My parents couldn't pay. My daddy built swimming pools, and my mom was, worked in a nursing home. So there you go. Yes, ma'am. I see her getting excited. Yes, ma'am. What you got?
I did read about the seal and expungement fair that happened. I thought that was interesting. Is that coming back? Can you tell us more about it? We got a meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock because we have one coming up soon. I think it's in December, but it might be January. We have one coming up soon. But y'all, you were talking about policy. There might a great policy, just throwing it out there, right, would be, you can have a felony for a grand theft. And grand theft used to be $300 just until a couple years ago. But you can have a grand theft back in 1981, and that theft is that felony is still bothering you because it doesn't go away. I think there should be some time limit on nonviolent felonies that they get off of your record, right? I just think there's some ways to have your criminal history not haunt you forever. People do some things early in life. My brother, he's passed away now, but last summer, but he got convicted of a cocaine possession back in like 96. He was still dealing with that. Couldn't get a job at Coca-Cola. Finally, Amazon hired him and then was promoting him before he died in a car crash. But before that, he was happy as he had been because he had never had a job that had benefits, et cetera, because of cocaine charge back when he was 18 years old. So that's always been a bother to me. And we also have the Keys to Drive program in the office, trying to get people their driver's licenses. That's a pipeline into the jail every day. People on bad license, they got to get to work, but they got a bad license. So anyway, that's kind of my rant right there. I just feel like the stealing and expungement is good, but everyone doesn't qualify for that. People come in off the street, we turn away just as many people we bring in who can help. You get one expungement your whole lifetime. And what I'm suggesting is over a certain period of time, after a certain period of time, maybe that record shouldn't be there if it's nonviolent.
7 years. I mean, that's what they got.
I think we might be able to get 10. Because right now, if somebody didn't do something for 10 years, we can't even score those prior crimes in their guidelines. We do the guideline sheets as far as, so they commit some crime now, we prosecuted them and they're gonna go to jail or whatever. We can't consider anything that's over 10 years old if they hadn't done anything recently. So along those same lines, and I don't think people even know that, honestly, but along those same lines though, I don't know if your nonviolent criminal history should be hurting you in your job search. So
what's your thoughts on Citizen Review Board?
My thoughts on it is that it's never going to happen to the extent that some people want it to happen. Some people want it to happen where the review board actually has the authority to discipline an officer and that kind of thing and dictate how the investigation goes. I don't think that's going to happen, honestly, but I could be wrong, but I feel like there's a wasted opportunity right in front of us because I've always felt like we closed our file, right? We did our investigation. So JSO presented what they had to present to us. We do the investigation. We close our file. That's public record now. There is nothing stopping your group from getting some people together who has some expertise and then maybe not even has expertise. They get together and they get that file and they have their own meeting on their own schedule and either they endorse what the decision was or they say, no, this is why we don't agree to that decision. And if you do that well enough, that group will gain some clout in the community. The community is going to listen to that group to some degree. Again, it doesn't have the same impact some people would like. And I don't, there's factions who want to be able to tell the sheriff how to discipline their officers, but I'm telling you, that seems like a pipe dream to me. But you can still have a group that can look at the data, look at what was there, and either endorse and say, you know what, on this investigation, we agree with the state attorney's office decision. In this investigation, we think they were wrong. And you don't even have to be justified and unjustified. There's a gray area too, where we feel like we're not going to call it justified or unjustified, but we're going to say that we don't have enough to prosecute the officer. That happens occasionally. And there might be a difference in opinion in that if somebody looks at it. but there's nothing stopping a group like that from getting together and being proactive and getting their hands on those files, having a group meeting, and then putting out their report to the community. Social media makes that so easy to put it out to the whole community on a podcast or whatever, a Zoom like this, you can put it out to the community. So that's my suggestion on it. I think power's right there, but we got people in City Hall fighting over subpoena powers and all this other stuff, where I think the people really want another voice besides JSO and State Attorney's Office on whether this was justified or not justified. That'll go a long way. I want that, because I think, you know what, we did our job right. We don't have any concern about somebody coming behind us and checking our work. So,
Miss Alicia.
I think I'm good for now.
So
I got 9 minutes, but I got this is Omega week now. We got Founders Day on Wednesday, so I got an event to get over to, but we got 9 minutes though. You got it.
So for people who may not know, because you know, people have short memories. Before JSO had body cameras, where these white cops was out here gunning down black men like it was the Wild Wild West in 1865. And they were still underfunding the North Side. Today, our groups was out here in the streets, and we planned one of the biggest. You know what? It's not even the size of it. It had a very direct effect, but we shut down 95 in protest of those things, and then later on that day we shut down the bridge where we got arrested.
Okay.
And the assistant state attorney was my attorney.
That happened.
That's how he got so famous. Now,
that came back. Like, let me just say this. I'm gonna put this right there for. I've said it to Steve Zona in person, but I'll say it to the public.
I know.
I was an attorney. I'm still an attorney, but I was a defense attorney, and I got a call. You got my number, and I got a call to meet you at the Emerson gas station. At least we agreed on that station because I was living on the south side, and we met in the middle. And I think the discussion was going to be on how to do this protest lawfully and some legal advice on the matter. And we never got to have a conversation because JSO broke it up and who are you, that kind of thing. I went on home. The next morning, I didn't have any court that morning, so I heard about it later. But ultimately, I was the president of the Perkins Bar at the time as well. And people got arrested for protesting and, you know, whatever the case might be. So we had people inside the Perkins Bar volunteer to represent folks who had gotten arrested. That wasn't an endorsement one way or another. I was just being a Black lawyer in the community, right? But what ended up happening when Melissa hired me in the position I'm in now, they attacked me publicly, attacked me across newspapers and on their Facebook pages and all that, saying, one, they said you were officer hating something, and I was you know with your cronies and all that, whatever, this craziness. Where I've always felt, whether I prosecute officers or prosecute a civilian, whatever the case might be, I'm being as fair as possible. And so I challenged them to look at my education record to see if there's something there that I'm not qualified, I'm not qualified to do this position. Look at my integrity over the last 20 years of doing this work. No, none of that. Just a matter of, and I think I challenged Zona on it, and I'll tell them again. I felt like it was all because I'm a Black man. You don't think a Black man can prosecute police officers fairly. That's what you think. All right. So
everybody know about Steve Zona.
Right. Well, I had an attitude, and I still have an attitude. And I'll say this publicly too. We had a meeting with me and Melissa and Zona and Mac Hevner, and I said, hey, how about this? How about I come to your FOP meeting, your fraternity order police meeting, first 20 minutes of the meeting, I'm up there, just a chair, everybody in your body. Anybody in your body can ask me whatever they want to ask me, right? Fair enough. That's transparency, right?
Right.
He said out of his mouth, and Melissa's welcome to come. Mac Hevner, welcome to come, but I can't come. So that's what I felt I was up against. I was like, I can't win, right? So I'm going to ignore that and do my job the best I can and do what I got to do. But ultimately, I'm telling you, between myself and the one who had the position prior to me, under Ms. Corey, I'm Black. That's it. I'm Black. He tried to say I was a defense attorney, but so was Melissa, and so was Lee Hutton, and so was so many people in my office, Shelley Thibodeau, right? They were defense attorneys. But again, you know what it boils down to. So no, I'll say it. I'll say it here. I'm not running from that. That's still a discussion that needs to be had. That you attack my character publicly when I don't think it's called for. I have some great friends who are JSO, and I have a job to do. you don't have to see me. You work for JSO, you don't have to see me.
That's right.
If you do your job well, right? My counterpart, Joe LaCondro, right? If you steal, you don't come to me, you go to Joe. You don't have to see Joe, right? So all that stuff, no, it gets me a little burned up. But in terms of that protest, it was, I think it was in reference to Michael Brown over in Ferguson. I think it was Ferguson protest, right?
Well, Mike Brown was just happened to be out there right at that point. His case was out because I had just came back from Ferguson. Okay.
But again, I wasn't a part of the protest. That wasn't my job. My job was legal counsel. And that's what it was. So when I thought we had some good defenses I'm not gonna get into the judge's decision, but the judge didn't agree with my premise on the case. So I'm not gonna tread down that road in terms of criticizing the judge's decision on it, but I thought we had some good defenses. To the one on the Hart Bridge protest, I thought we had, I thought that was, we had some good defenses of that, but anyway.
Yeah, just for the record, you were not a part of any planning. What I was attempting to do was just make sure I followed all the legalities possible and just push the edge personally. Right. And I appreciated your help then, and I appreciate your help now for what you're doing on a bigger scale. Yes. And I can tell you, I mean, most people don't like to admit it, but from what we was doing, JSO got body cameras now. And not only from that, the rest of the country was doing protests. And I know people think what they want about protesting, but for Black people, let me just make it clear. If it wasn't for those community advocates, activists, revolutionaries, you still be in Jim Crow. Because it was those movements that ended Jim Crow, the Civil Rights Act. Anyway, any last words, Mr. Holiday?
I said everything I had to say, but say hi to your sister and much respect for your dad, man. You know, I've always respected him and the work he does. So I look up to him. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you again. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll take care now.
All right.